The Joining the Dots podcast focuses on the many challenges facing education and how different approaches and innovations are needed to meet those challenges.
Join co-hosts Matt Jessup and Elle Kingsley as they have discussions with innovative educators, business leaders, policymakers, and other stakeholders, and guests looking at transforming the future of education.
Thank you for joining us this morning, Naomi. I'm going to try and describe you. You are a very prominent, very influential, very successful voice in the technology sector. And I'm going to say Greater Manchester, but actually you're based in Greater Manchester. Your voice and experience is much, much wider. I'm just sort of keen to explore your experience on how technology intersects with education and vice versa, and what you've come across in that area.
Okay, so I'll probably be a bit prudent if I tell you actually what I do. So I wear a number of different hats. So I'm a freelance growth and innovation consultant. I've designed and delivered lots of entrepreneurship programs to startups and scale-ups, predominantly in the tech, digital and creative space, but I've worked with pretty much every type of business you can imagine. I work one day a week for Oxford Innovation at the Innovation Centre in Stockport, where I'm Innovation Director. My role there is to support the businesses to start, grow, innovate. I also work on a number of other different things. So I am the UK lead for Global Tech Advocates. Global Tech Advocates was initially born out of London, and I run Tech North Advocates with a guy called Volker Hirsch. And that's really about making sure that we can connect northern tech businesses to a wider community globally. I also sit on a couple of different boards. Both of the ones that I sit on at the moment, one is a social enterprise called PI, which is all about working with young people in schools around pursuing their individual excellence. And then the other one is a Digital Advantage. So Digital Advantage work with a lot of neurodiverse young people to get them into the tech sector. So real life sort of experience. But Digital Advantage also done quite a few other things. So pre-COVID, Greater Manchester Combined Authority did a brilliant program called Go Digital. So I went to about 50 different schools across Greater Manchester. Myself and a guy called Ashley did all the initial assemblies, getting the young people excited about what the digital sector was, but also how technology touches every point in their lives. So yeah, I've got a real crossover. I've done a lot of, I'm design sprint trained as well. So I've helped lots of people from what problems can you solve using a methodology, the design sprint methodology. I've done that with a lot of young people as well. And that's something that I love. So like this week on Wednesday, I was with apprentices at Wigan and Lee College doing a design sprint with them, and they were incredible. Most of them were nuclear engineer apprentices, and the actual business challenge that we had, which was a live business challenge from a local business, was all around marketing for office furniture business. So nothing to do with what they are actually learning, but they came up with some really brilliant ideas.
But then the podcast called Join the Dots, because certainly Al is very connected, technology, business, education. I'm mainly education, but my frustration is that education has got a huge disconnect with businesses in general.
Yeah. And
it seems more like a niche. I mean, what you're doing is amazing. And just hearing things like kids get the chance to actually put real life skills that aren't curriculum and aren't accountable for the national curriculum thing sounds amazing. But do you find that disconnect quite frustrating in terms of education technology, because you've got a foot in both worlds?
Yeah, I do. So up in Greater Manchester, they have, I'm sure they do it in other parts of the country, but they obviously have careers in enterprise. And I was an enterprise advisor for a couple of high schools. The first one I was at, we actually, I believe that you can bring in entrepreneurship, education, which is a field that I'm really passionate about, into every subject. And we actually did a pilot with I think it was DT course, so design and technology, got a challenge from a local business, and they had to design products. And not only did they design the products, they also had to like learn how to market them and do the branding and all these other things. So using lots of other different skills. They did that, and they actually have rolled it out. But to do that, one of the things that we did is, and it's very different with different schools, but this particular one was a grammar school, and I said, you've got all these parents that making assumptions that some of them will have pretty good jobs. Get them to get at least 100 that they can donate at least 1 hour of their time a year to talk about what they do in their jobs. But yeah, it's very frustrating, and I think with especially around careers, most careers educators do not know the breadth of different roles out there, especially in the tech sector. I also think that the GCSE technology course, and a lot of schools are not even doing it anymore, which I think is really quite scary. So we're seeing, things like the World Economic Forum, future jobs of tomorrow. They're all looking for creative problem solving. They're looking for, technology. They're looking for resilience, loads of other things, which unfortunately a lot of young people are not taught. And what I will say, this is not just the responsibility of the educators; it's the responsibility of the parents and carers.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're following a very common theme here for the other guests we've had, Naomi, which is lovely, which kind of does for us join the dots, which is employers are increasingly becoming focused on the human attributes, the skills-based acquisition, not necessarily the pure knowledge retention. To join in the dots bits, I wish we could just pick up Naomi and put her down in my region. So I'm part of a mayoral authority, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
So it's the same as Manchester.
We're slightly earlier on our journey in terms of scale, but Cambridge particularly is recognised as that international centre. But we've seen this message about we want to grow UK PLC, and Cambridge is one of the beacons around the world. We need to grow you, and then at the same time, there's been a disconnect. We've removed the funding for our local enterprise partnerships. I sat on the Oxford-Cambridge partnership. That's just been defunded, and they're now going to come up with something else. And there's been this kind of disconnect between who's handling adult education budgets and how things are scaling. And it feels like, on one hand, nobody seems to assess that the best way for economic growth is to start by skilling the workforce.
Absolutely.
But also that rather than it being top down as a strategy, it's relying on local experience and skills, like your good self and other organisations, to actually drive on a sort of a local level rather than the other way around. Is that what you're seeing?
So there's a number of different organisations in Manchester that sort of support things like this. What I will say is I don't believe that schools make it easy for businesses to engage with them. And there's probably lots of different reasons around that. It's just a little bit the same with universities. I'm always encouraging businesses to work with universities for many reasons, but there's not always an obvious front door. So I suppose, it's about making sure that actually even the careers educators understand about the different breadth of jobs. They've got those relationships with local businesses and they understand what the local job market is. But it's very frustrating. I think unfortunately, because of the sort of exam system and the fact that we're just getting people to remember stuff and not actually do challenges and things like that, which the old GCSEs did, I think that's a problem. And also, sorry.
On the careers bit, it's a bit anecdotal, I guess, but for years our schools have been measured as one of our success measures is how many of our young people go from our secondary schools into university. And I wonder whether people still diminish this idea that there are other pathways to learning and degree level apprenticeships and other pathways with direct employer engagement. Often actually now are the more savvy, smart way of going.
Absolutely. I've got two daughters. One of them went to a grammar school, but the other one just went to a regular school. I remember the grammar school. They asked me to do a few different things in there. So I did like a couple of different design sprints. I did the whole thing around talking to them about different, jobs, roles, and things like that. and they asked me to get involved with their careers evening. And when I found out the lack of that they wouldn't have any local colleges in there, they did have apprenticeships, but not as many as they probably could have done. They were like quite high level ones. But what I think is really interesting is that there is the assumption that most young people will go down that path of university, and I see lots of people coming out of university, can't get jobs, or they've done a degree where they haven't really thought about, okay, do you know what, this is the kind of jobs that I could get with this, and they just end up going to work in a coffee shop or something. But I think what we need to be doing as educators and as parents and carers is actually giving young people as much knowledge about what else is out there other than university.
So would you say that one of the core roles that you're filling or is missing in many regions is we refer to it on different topics. The Donald Rumsfeld bit is not the known knowns or the known unknowns, it's the unknown unknowns. Is actually shining a spotlight on what those pathways might be and how there's a connection between the skills we're acquiring and the types of jobs that are out there. Because if we listed the jobs of the future in 10 years from now, well, firstly, we'd be making it up because we wouldn't necessarily know. Yeah. But even now, the jobs for our learners who are some years before they arrive there are shifting quite significantly, aren't they?
Absolutely. So I've done a lot of work with the Turing Innovation Catalyst, so working with the accelerator, but also ecosystem and engagement about what they do as an organisation. But then I created with another guy called James Ackrick, who's a technologist. We created a pilot for DSIT, so the Department of Science, Industry and Technology, and that was specifically around. It was called AI Empower. Literally just finished, and that was all around supporting businesses to understand how they can use AI to support the growth of their business. The really scary thing is that we are not doing that within the education system. I think a lot of people are completely scared of it. It's something that is going to be in the jobs that they go in. And I suppose, like I wrote an article years ago, and I'm going to go back to the entrepreneurship bit. I wrote an article years ago for Academies magazine. Don't even know whether it's still around. And that was around going back to what I said before about entrepreneurship education should be going through the veins of a school, even at a very young age, and encouraging young people how to create their own wealth and create their own things, because that is another option as well that is not talked about enough. And also as well, you know, just with the education side of things and entrepreneurship, actually, you know, supporting that problem solving as well. So, okay, this is a problem. I can understand that problem and then try and solve it. And whether that is actually a product or a service or whatever it is, I think that needs to be massively encouraged in schools at a very primary age, all the way through.
One of the things that we do here is we link with the Apprentices Trust, which is now the King's Trust, or they're still sorting out the marketing there a bit. Yeah. I think we were the first primary school in the country that could get an Ofqual approved diploma for the kids, but it's never happened. And they've now moved to urban areas away from rural areas. Yeah. But within that, the entrepreneurship unit was one of the most popular ones because our year 5, 6s got to do it, and at country fairs they would make several £100 over the course of a few hours, and some went to charity, some went to them, some went to the actual fair. But
here's the challenge.
What we got from it is amazing.
Yeah.
There's often this challenge that I see, particularly when we have that business education dialogue. The word entrepreneur, good word or bad word, Naomi?
I think it's a bit cheesy. I don't like it, but, you know.
I think, and I asked the question because I don't think I've got an answer either, unfortunately. But I asked the question because I think sometimes we struggle to signpost what that sense of creative, innovative businesses, what that role, what that looks like. How do you put a label on it? And the word entrepreneur somehow feels a bit like that's not me. I'm not quite sure who that is.
I understand. I don't mind it being used in the term entrepreneurship education. And actually, there are some really brilliant entrepreneurship educators. So there's two guys over in. They're actually. I'm going to find it now. They're brilliant. There's a guy that I know. I did a TEDx talk in America when was it, 2016, with my then 11-year-old daughter, and we did a TED talk just near a town called Normal, which is where Illinois State University is.
Town called Normal.
Yeah, we were talking about how if children or if adults thought more like kids, they'd come up with better ideas. And it was fantastic. Like, my daughter at the time was 11, so really, really quite incredible. But this guy, there's a guy called Doan Winkle, who's the guy that got me to come over, and he's got I'm just trying to find it now. He works at John Carroll University now, but within that, he teaches a number of different things. But he gets university students to basically go through twice, like, tools, knowledge, mentoring. They start businesses, whether they're doing business or anything, and they have this really brilliant. It's called Teaching Entrepreneurship. Have a look at it. If you're a teacher, it's completely free for you to use. I'll email you the link now, but they have some really, really brilliant things on there, which I think you could bring into whether it was primary education or senior education or other universities, but absolutely fantastic. And getting young people to think, because at the centre it's all about problem solving and about understanding the customers, understanding what the problem is that you're trying to solve, etc., etc. And that's what employers want now.
I think to stick up, well, not stick up for education, but I mean, education is bound by ridiculous accountability measures.
I know.
Which more and more people are saying, you know what, bollocks to the accountability measures, will do what's best for the kids.
Yeah.
NEAT has been something I've been researching recently.
Yeah.
Not in employment and education. When Al talks about these alternative pathways and what you're doing. Yeah. The sheer volume of NEAT 16 to 24 in this country. Yeah. And in other countries in the EU, in Spain, it's 40-odd%. Yeah. And Italy's got, it's off the chart. And you'd think that would be the biggest flag ever to governments that actually we need to radically change. Yeah. Not the education system, but the alternative pathways within our education systems. Yeah. And yet we're still doubling down on what we've got with the odd tweak.
And then also as well, you know, like I got diagnosed with ADHD last year, and I'm 53 now, but at the age of 52, so I really struggled at school.
That's my badge now. Right, Diagnosis Club.
Yeah. Right, I want one of them. So I really struggled at school, and I always knew that I was smart, but if you looked at like my sort of the exams that I had, like I was like at school when it was O levels and CSEs. I've got like load of CSEs, never got an O level. I went to university when I was 44, and got accepted on a master's course in, I think it was like digital marketing or something like that, but it was more than that. And I think I lasted a year. I got a postgrad certificate, had a graduation party, but yeah, I don't learn. Not everybody learns in the same way, and I think that's another thing which is obviously becoming more and more highlighted. But I suppose, you know, you never know what a young person's going through. My sister's a head teacher, so at a primary school in Liverpool, and she's, you know, in the school holiday, she's making sure that the kids get fed. She's making sure that some of them have got a bed to sleep in.
Just talked about this in the previous podcast.
Yeah, and what's really, really, really sad is that a lot of those NEETs have probably had really horrific childhoods, and through no fault of their own, and gone down a path that they haven't been able to get out of. And it's like there has to be something where you can support them. And actually, I'm going to come back to it. Helping them set up their own thing is sometimes a really good way of doing that. It gives them confidence.
Yeah. does. What's the? I mean, you're providing kind of guidance and a steer in quite a few different directions. I've got to call a bit of that glue in the process.
Yeah.
What's the number one challenge that you see is on the rise that you're trying to help mitigate? Is it the lack of the understanding of what those next step pathways are? Is it how to refine the skills conversation, or is it from a business decision that kind of putting the processes in place to actually embrace and support change themselves?
I think it's a bit of everything. If we go back to the middle bit, which is about the skills piece. So I sit on a couple of boards in GM around that as well. And yes, I completely get where you're coming from around schools. You are dictated about how you have to educate, the outcomes that you have, which must be incredibly frustrating. And I think that we are not skilling up our young people, especially around those sort of what's called softer skills for the workplace. And I think it's really, really important that actually, whether it's sort of like, so if you look at like Cumbria, for example, obviously they've got this 100-year project to decommission Sellafield. So there's going to be loads of massive changes there. Those young people, if it wasn't being decommissioned, a lot of those young people would have gone to work in the nuclear industry in that area. What's going to happen now? And it's like in Manchester, we've got pockets of Manchester, you've got lots of manufacturing. A lot of manufacturers are, especially the smaller ones, as family businesses, they are not being able to continue because the young people within those families don't want to take over the businesses. And it's about making sure that we're skilling up, not just in things like technology, but lots of other things. There's trades that will literally be decimated.
I mean, you mentioned Cumbria now. I mean, I live in Cumbria and I work in Cumbria, and I'm quite frustrated by Cumbria. So I see like Baltic Ventures in Liverpool with Johnny Clark, and I see the Manchester Maturing Innovations, and I think we need something like this in Cumbria.
Yeah,
I've spoken to various people, and I don't have the time to do it. But as someone with two daughters, I'm very keen that they're made aware of other options, and I speak to businesses like BAE and GlaxoSmithKline, and the pathways aren't there, and the schools aren't open. Like you said, there's no real front door. I mean, how do you get around that though? It's
I don't know. It's like
constant banging on the door, basically, isn't it?
It's you. Obviously, you can do it through things like like in Greater Manchester, you can do it through the Careers and Enterprise. But even then, they have like the reason they have these like enterprise volunteers, like I did. That was because they could connect them to the local business community. But even then, to be fair, with most of the schools I worked with, it was a tick boxing exercise. And actually, I got increasingly frustrated because I wanted to do stuff, couldn't do it. So ended up actually saying, do you know what? I've not wasted, but I've spent 4 years of my life supporting, and you're not doing anything. You're not doing it because unfortunately teachers are so busy doing all the other things. They are often given these other tasks to do as well as all the other bloody work they've got to do.
Yeah, it's impossible. I mean, we've had we had Minerva Virtual Academy on the other week, Al, didn't we? Which is an online hybrid school, which I'm very impressed with. I'm a big believer in that the future of education is going to be hybrid schools, and and the concept of hybrid school that is actually set up and linked directly with businesses from the start.
Yeah,
and that the hybrid school actually tailors their curriculum to meet kids' needs that align with businesses. That's got to be the way forward, surely.
Yeah. I think it probably is. And again, obviously it depends on. I think you have to think about locality, but even universities have this problem. So you'll get all these big brains come into university, and the areas where those universities are desperate to keep that talent. And some of them stay, and a lot of them go. And I remember years ago, I was involved with a project which was, God, who was it? I think it was. It wasn't the Department of Education, it was something else. I think it was a BASE thing, which was like now DSET. And that was, they paid for students from universities abroad to come to the UK. And I remember a load of them came to Manchester, and I had a group of Mexicans who were fantastic. And they basically, it was all like a sort of entrepreneurship thing. And what the thing was, if they won this competition, they would get to set up their idea in the UK, get visas, get a load of other things, getting business support, getting co-working space, and a load of other, really cool things. But we don't do that internally. And it was about making sure that they had talent from and brains from everywhere. The problem that we've also got is we need to make sure that we keep our brains here and encourage them and help them to blossom and be the best versions of themselves and be able to have opportunity here.
Yeah, and that filters down to the human being level, but also for our business ecosystem, whether it's startup or scale up. There's a natural propensity to say we want to support business and economic growth.
Yeah,
I've seen it in our regional authority. We've done investment grants on all sorts of businesses, and the people they've recruited are based all around the globe. And it's like, wouldn't there be a greater win if we could foster that ecosystem? But isn't that about joined up thinking? I mean, that comes all the way back full circle.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
Having enough people where we're having those connections between skills, education, and commercial. In our region, we have a labour market survey that's done, the labour market information each year that kind of does the breakdown of what employers want versus what the. Do you have something similar? I'm guessing you must be
They do a lot of research, especially around this, because of the things that I sit on around digital skills. So they do a lot of stuff like that. But again, you've got different schools in different areas where those young people are still not getting access to what everybody else is getting access to. And then you think about a school in a deprived area, they're not going to have the same demographic of parents that would be able to say, okay, do you know what? This is how you do this, this is how you do this. And be able to sort of say, these are the opportunities that are out there. And that makes me sad.
What about from a business perspective, Naomi? Are you seeing gaps in terms of some sectors that are embracing some of the technology options to improve efficiencies and work, and others that are struggling?
Yeah, so the pilot that we did, the Empower AI pilot, we had, it was only supposed to be for 8 businesses, but I wanted to have as many as possible. And we had 14 businesses on it, ranging from charity to a timber merchant. And we basically went through a whole series of a whole program, online and in person. So they had 2 sessions a month, and the feedback and the changes that were made were absolutely phenomenal. And actually seeing really big things that they could bring into the businesses at a very, quite quickly. So that'll be interesting to see whether DSIT funds something like that again. But I know that
the boost program, that kind of thing.
No, completely separate. It was something that, like, I had my hat on. So I'm not a technologist, but I work with tech businesses. So I was coming in from a sort of like, okay, look at the problems within your business. Don't just do AI because it's a big shiny thing. And then James is ex Microsoft. He used to be head of technology for partners. Really smart guy. So he was coming it from the technology side of things. And yeah, really different types of businesses, but actually getting them to practically do it themselves. It wasn't just, oh yeah, this is how this works. They were doing it themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting, Matt, isn't it, that sometimes in business that as technology is moving, there's levers to improve efficiencies and performance, but it all comes down to understanding the why we're trying to do this, not the shiny. And it's the exact same conversation we've been having in education at different stages, which is there's no race to whichever school's got the most tech is the best school. It's where it's purposeful.
Yeah, of course it is. But what the great thing about this was like they were really. So I'll give you an example. The timber merchant guy, he wanted to get his EPOS system to talk to the order system, which I'm not sure why it didn't work in the first place. He was quoted 20 grand by a tech company to make that happen. We showed him how to do it himself with agents, with automation agents. We showed him how to do it himself. So again, and then also being able to save them time to do loads of other things, but getting them to actually understand what it is, how it works. And even if they do end up getting other people to do some of the real deep tech stuff, they have a basic understanding of it. I think that's really important.
It's one that always continues to baffle me that many organisations, where I totally respect budgets are tight, seem reluctant to invest in that professional development, to speak to good folks like yourself, where they can get advice that will help them and empower them to save a fortune in the future. Because they don't want to spend a small amount of money, but they'll end up paying a fortune to a consultant for a clumsy fix.
No, and you know what? These guys were really lucky because it was something that was funded by DSA. You know, I've seen other programs like, you know, that obviously sold commercially, but the fact that they actually learn a lot and have these key takeaways was really big. But I think, again, we need to be doing that within education as well.
Oh man!
You know, the fact that you've got platforms now. There's this thing called vibe coding, which is a real cheesy and basically in a couple of hours you can develop a workable prototype. We should be teaching that in schools.
There are some good apps for vibe coding. There's a bit of a usual thing, which is whenever someone raises it, there's somebody else saying, "Oh, hang on, I don't know." But again, it's about empowering people to actually.
Of course it is. Brilliant.
I think vibe coding falls into the same conversation about project-based learning, which is if you're doing something with purpose and you're creating something tangible, it's much easier to get engagement and motivation and commitment to follow that journey through. Whatever your views are on whether you're not learning all the steps at a low level. I mean, there's an argument, isn't there? If you use all these tools, you don't learn to code yourself. If you use all this AI, you won't learn to think for yourself. There's a sweet spot in everything. And actually making things accessible is a win, not a loss.
Absolutely. But also, you know, it's only as good as what you put into it.
Yes. The garbage in, garbage out thing gets thrown into many conversations. But you know what? It stood the test of time in so many different conversations, doesn't it? Matt, I'm conscious we're at just past the half-hour mark. Is there anything you wanted to kind of wrap up? Or
trying to keep going with it all. I just find it really frustrating, Naomi, that, I mean, in education, you mentioned the World Economic Forum, and in 2017, I remember reading it, and it sort of shaped our schools' next steps, and it was like education system's not fit for purpose, blah, blah, blah. And yet here we are 8 years on, and
having the same conversation.
We've got greater disparities and attainment gaps and disadvantage gaps and all sorts of things, and yet we're not actually addressing it, and it frustrates the hell out of me.
I can imagine.
But I mean, I don't know. Nobody has the answer, do they, really? But joining the dots is the answer. But
getting the right people around the table and actually trying to scale that on a national level. For folks listening in and thinking well, she made some sense. The two guys seem to be going off down all sorts of tangents, but I'd like to know more from Naomi. How could people reach out and connect with you, Naomi?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Naomi Timperley, Timperley. Really happy to talk to anybody about any of the subjects we talked about, because I'm really passionate about all of them, and I've absolutely loved talking to you both. So
I'm going to book 2 or 3 sessions myself, Naomi.
Right. No, it's I've really enjoyed it, and you know, I'm really passionate about all of those things. I'm also passionate about working with businesses as well, but I do think the young people and supporting them is a really special thing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for giving up your time at a weekend.
No
problem.
Really enjoy meeting you and having a chat. Thank you.
Have a good weekend.